So the Switch 2 came out 2 days ago on Thursday, June 5th, and it turns out literally on day one, a person has already exploited something in the console that has basically shown that the console is not completely hack-proof. Now the console wasn't like fully taken over or anything like that, but it is a step in that direction. It's a step toward basically understanding how the console works. And if you're looking really ahead, it is probably a step in the direction of maybe some unofficial emulation. There's a lot of technical stuff here. There's a lot of tech-savvy stuff that, I'm an idiot. I don't understand how all of this stuff works. But this is just to talk about it. I'm not actually endorsing any of this stuff. I'm not endorsing any kind of unauthorized use of software. But anyway, I think I've kind of got a good understanding of everything, at least on the surface level. Like I said, I'm still an idiot, still trying to, get through the tech stuff. But basically, this was all surrounding a person by the name of David Buchanan, or Retro ID. I'm assuming David Buchanan's like one of those fake names. Maybe not, I don't know. It sounds too cool to be a real name. Okay, that's really all I'm getting at. So it looks like this is kind of what this person does. They are a reverse engineering kind of person. They exploit hardware, stuff like that. And so anyway, June 5th, like I said, that's when Switch 2 came out. And on that same day at, I'm seeing 3:48 a.m., David Buchanan posted and said, userland ROP on day one. Now don't worry if you are confused and totally lost on, the significance of that. I was too. So from what I understand, this is a common kind of foot in the door hacking method when people are trying to gain access to consoles. Basically, this is like the first step toward anything like that, and this was, done on day one. So it's userland ROP, that's return-oriented programming. This is a computer security exploit technique that operates within the userland or user space. This is like where games and apps and stuff like that run of an operating system, the part of the system that runs applications and user programs distinct from the kernel. And Wikipedia basically says the same thing, and that it's a way for somebody to execute code in the presence of security defenses. It sounds like this is basically building code using the parts that are already in the console itself rather than like outside sources. Now, this is huge because it proves basically that the Switch 2 is not unhackable. I'm seeing this stuff that basically says that a lot of people claim that it would maybe be unhackable. I don't really know why people would have thought that. I don't know. I mean, I guess to be fair, Nintendo has really taken like an anti-piracy measure as of recent. They had a lot of issues with like Yuzu and other emulators, so, I guess it was safe to assume that they would really be combating this with some sort of security measure. But as I said, this is huge because this proves that the Switch 2 is not unhackable. And not only that, but as I said, the userland ROP method, it sounds like that's usually the first step when hacking into consoles, and basically people could use this knowledge to kind of escalate things from there, and maybe eventually things like homebrew software and emulators could result. Now I'm seeing that David did get quite a bit of attention from this, and he made a lot of posts basically saying that people were misrepresenting and misunderstanding basically things that were happening. Essentially, it sounds like a lot of people are saying that like he found an exploit, kind of like he found an Easter egg or something, when really that's not the case. This is something that he built himself. This is something that he did himself, using probably some really advanced technical skills that, as I said, I definitely do not understand. Now, David did say in a post later in the day on the day one release that explaining what this whole thing truly means requires describing too much Switch security architecture. And as I said, I wouldn't understand all that stuff, but the TLDR is don't get too excited, because Nintendo's security model basically does assume that this is possible. So Nintendo didn't like think that the console was going to be, completely hack-proof or anything, but he says it is nonetheless a useful starting point for further research. And yes, that is a very good point. This is not a full jailbreak. This does not mean full emulation is now going to be available on day one, but this is the earliest form of progress, basically, progress going forward. I mean, this is now going to set the foundation for possibly further exploits of the Switch 2. This all had to do with the userland. As I said, the userland is kind of just the place that I guess a lot of these games and apps run from. Yeah, this is like gaining access to the userland and not the kernel. From what I've read, the kernel is way more important here. If somebody gains access to that, then that could very much lead to some kind of like a full-blown access to the console. And as I said, that is not what happened here, but as I also said, this is possibly a step in that direction.